Confidence is our kids' best defense against so many of the challenges and dangers that face them in the world, whether that's against bullies, whether that's against adult predators. Allie Neal and her organization, Revved Up Kids, have built a program that teaches that confidence right along with self-defense skills to protect our kids from those dangers. She was kind enough to talk to us about her program and give us some hints that we can apply today to keep our kids safer through education and confidence. If you get the chance, please do like and subscribe us. Go over to Patreon and support us that way if you have a mind. It helps more than you know. Thanks for watching today, everybody. And now let's get to work. Hello and welcome back, everybody, to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason, and joining me today is Allie Neal. Hello, Allie.
Hi, Jason.
Thank you so much for coming on today. How are you?
I am thrilled to be here on this beautiful Wednesday morning and excited to talk to you and talk to your listeners.
Not nearly as excited as I am. Allie Neal is a child safety expert and the co-founder and executive director of the Atlanta-based Revved Up Kids. She holds a bachelor's degree in business from Miami University of Ohio. Her continuing education includes child sexual abuse, trauma-informed care, and adverse childhood experience. Allie is the mother of 2 young adults. She's a member of several nonprofit collaboratives, including the Gwinnett Coalition Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Committee, the DeKalb Youth Services Coalition, and the Cobb Collaborative, where she chaired the Family and Children Strategy Team in 2019 and 2020. Allie was selected as a nonprofit community impact leader by the Greater North Folsom Chamber of Commerce in 2018 and 2019. In 2010, she and her husband David founded Revved Up Kids to protect children and teenagers from sexual abuse and exploitation. And to date, Revved Up Kids has trained almost 40,000 children and teens to be safer from sexual predators. So thank you very much for your good work. It's just past your 10th anniversary of Revved Up Kids.
Yes, and we're in our 8th year as a nonprofit. So really, really proud of the work that we've been doing.
Wow. And what brought this to the forefront of your priorities? Made you decide to make this something you did with your life?
Honestly, I don't know how spiritual your listeners are, but for me, it was a clear call from God about the direction that my life needed to go. And I followed that call and have been walking by faith every day since that point in time.
And doing the good works.
Yes.
And so could we start with child sexual abuse? And I think there are a lot of misconceptions. One of the big ones, of course, being that many people think of the guy in the van or the stranger abduction situation, but those are vanishingly rare, where most of the time, where do the risks for sexual abuse come from?
Almost always somebody that you and your child know and trust. So it's really, really scary to think about that, but stranger danger is just not really a thing. Obviously it happens, and it happens enough that children need to learn about it, but that's not where the focus needs to be in the family conversation.
Absolutely. One of my earlier guests said that if you look at the statistics for child molestation and you take the set of that were strangers, which does happen occasionally, but the number is so small that if it was a scientific paper, it could be a rounding error in comparison to the threat from people who our children know and who our children trust and who unfortunately we trust.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Revved Up Kids is a program that teaches kids to be able to resist that and prevent that even from very young ages. So can you tell them what's the founding principle of Revved Up Kids? What's the secret sauce? Seems kind of a lame thing to say concerning the topic, but that's what we're talking about. What is it? What's the secret?
So I wouldn't say that any of it is a secret. All of us who work in this field, if you will, are dealing with the same information, the same set of parameters, the same best practices. And what we've done at Revved Up Kids that's a little bit different is we really are focusing on empowering the children. So there are lots and lots of programs out there that are raising awareness for adults and equipping adults to be protectors. And that's really what needs to be happening. Adults should be protecting our children, but I still believe in my heart of hearts that the easiest target for a predator is a child who's never heard anything about predators and doesn't even know that they exist. So at Revved Up Kids, we're trying to help that family conversation by opening it with the children and letting them know, hey, these people are out there and these people do really bad things to kids. And we want you to know about these people and we want you to know what you can do to be safer. So that's really, I guess if I have to think about what is maybe a little bit different about our program, it's the child-focused mission. We also train adults, of course, because that's an enormous piece of this puzzle. But really, I would say 80 to 90% of the training we provide is for the children and the teenagers. And then the other thing that's unique about us is we roll in a self-defense component into a lot of our training. So we want the kids to know, hey, here's who these people are and here's how they operate and here's what you can do every day to be safer, like, helping them understand how to set strong personal boundaries and use their voice with power and things like that. But also, hey, if somebody's trying to hurt you or take you, here's something you can do to hurt them enough that they'll say ow and let go of you and you can run away to safety. So that's another piece of our programming that's a little bit unique. And obviously it's not going to work in every circumstance. A lot of children are being sexually abused by somebody in their home. So they may not feel comfortable kicking that person in the knee or poking them in the eye, and that's understandable. So the other big piece is disclose, disclose, disclose. Help them understand that this is not okay and that they need to tell a trusted adult if anybody ever does it to them, even if it's somebody that they love.
So there's an interesting piece in there that you talk about when we're talking about physical self-defense or reporting or setting boundaries. One of the hardest things for people, I taught martial arts for very, very many years, I still do, but a lot of the people who would come back later who had been hurt in a situation, what was missing was the permission that they gave themselves to physically protect themselves, to hurt another person.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that that's very easy with kids either, especially if it's an uncle or another beloved family member. What do we say to children and teens about, hey, if somebody is doing this to you, you absolutely have permission to put a thumb in their eye and call them a dirty name and run away?
And that is exactly what we say. We don't encourage calling of the dirty names. we encourage the use, just like your training in martial arts, right? We want to be breathing and yelling in order to overcome our fear response and get our adrenaline under control. So we're teaching them to, yell no in their safe voice or yell fire in their safe voice. With the older kids, we yell fire. With the younger kids, we yell no. And that's just a function of, and you've probably heard this a lot, if you're out somewhere and you're being assaulted, if you yell fire, you could draw witnesses into your situation versus yelling something else might make witnesses not want to get involved. So
no, that makes good sense. See also the advice that if you're in a carjacking situation, wreck your car. Nothing pulls people's gaze and attention like the sound of a car hitting something.
Yeah. And interestingly, especially with the older kids, just teaching them that, just telling them those little things for safety is so enlightening for them because nobody has these conversations with them. The kids hear their whole lives, be polite and respectful, do what the grown-ups say, do what you're told, don't talk back. And when someone stands in front of them and says, hey, if somebody's not respecting your boundaries, if somebody's treating you badly, if somebody's making you feel scared or threatened, guess what? You have permission to defend yourself, and you're allowed to yell at them, and you're allowed to pull away, and you're even allowed to hurt them if you need to hurt them to get yourself out of that situation. So just giving that permission, like you said, is so important and valuable for these children.
Cannot agree more. Now, you used a phrase earlier that I bet you maybe it has a little TM next to it in parentheses, using your safe voice. What is your safe voice, and how do we teach our kids to use it?
Yeah, so we no TM. Makes me think maybe we do, but no TM. We call a lot of things safe. Our tagline is "Be smart, be strong, be safe." That is trademarked, thankfully. But anyway, so when somebody is assaulted, we talk to them about that natural physiological response to fear that most bodies have. And that is, your adrenaline is going to flood into your body, and time is going to slow down, and your mind is going to race, and you're going to stop breathing, and you're going to start freezing up. And so the safe voice for us is a way to overcome that and mount your self-defense response. So when we do a safe voice, we pull deep breaths of air into our belly, and we yell out from our belly instead of yelling from our throat. And that helps us to have to focus our mind on breathing, and it helps us focus on mounting our defensive response. So just like, you always hear in the old-timey karate movies, hi-ya,
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing, except you're yelling no, or you're yelling fire, and that's triggering in your mind, I'm defending myself right now.
Okay. So classic physiological stress response, and you hit the nail on the head. The ki from martial arts is exactly that. It's the same technique.
Yeah.
And it's been shown to get people past fear, past panic. Okay.
And into power, really
Yes.
into power. I'm astounded. And I always tell, especially the teenage girls when I train them, I'm like, when I'm training and when I'm yelling in my safe voice and when I'm hitting on the dummy, and we use one of those torso shaped Bob dummies, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
So I say, I feel like I could just take Bob's head and rip it right off his neck. I feel so powerful. And that's the way we would want anybody to feel if they're having to defend themselves against a physical or sexual assault. So yeah, it is amazing what you can do if somebody teaches you how.
Outstanding. Now, I noticed on your website, one of the things that was kind of unique to your program, from my experience at least, was you had training for different ages. And I'd love to get some insights on, obviously, teaching my kindergartner the rudiments of the risk of sexual abuse and how to prevent it. And also physical self-defense is going to be different from teaching an 18-year-old wrestling champion about what to do if an adult tries to touch you inappropriately. So let's start with that early childhood. What are some of the keys that we need to understand and communicate with our kids, and how do we talk to a 6-year-old?
Right. And I would go back even farther than that, Jason. I would start when I'm teaching my child the names of their body parts. When my child is inquisitive and I'm teaching them eyes, nose, mouth, I'm also going to teach them penis and vagina. I'm not going to call it a pee-pee or a TT or whatever. I'm going to teach them the correct anatomical names for their body parts, because if you're making up a cute, silly name, you can't even say the name, you're automatically attaching shame to that body part, aren't you? And if shame is attached, then it's going to be in that child's mind something that we don't talk about, we don't touch, it's dirty, whatever. And frankly, a lot of parents even teach that, because that's generationally what we've all been taught about those body parts, right? So when your kids are little itty bitties, they need to know that this is a vagina or a vulva and this is a penis, and they need to understand that, and they need to say those words comfortably, and parents need to say those words comfortably too. And it's way harder for the parents, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we start there.
Mhm.
And then we also teach them my private body parts are the parts of my body that are covered up by my swimsuit. And nobody really should be seeing or touching my private body parts. Obviously, when they're little and they're wearing diapers, there has to be that sort of, sometimes mommy changes your diaper and has to wipe you or whatever. And you kind of have to walk that line of what's okay and not okay. And really it comes down to, and I know this is a kind of a weird way to say it, and I've been struggling with how to say it, but it really comes down to, is somebody like paying really lots of attention to my private body parts and even playing with my private body parts? And that's where we draw the line, versus bathing or changing my diaper or whatever.
Or the doctor visit.
Or the doctor visit.
Yeah.
When the doctor visits, the doctor should be asking you before they touch your private body parts. They're going to say, I need to do an exam and I need to touch your private body parts. Is that okay? And if you have a pediatrician who's not asking, that's a problem too, because pediatricians have largely been educated that they now need to be asking the patient permission before they touch those body parts, just to continue to reinforce your body is yours. Nobody should see or touch your body parts without your permission ever. So that's something else that parents need to be, working on. And then, I can go all the way through if you want, but I don't want to be, in this giant monologue. So tell me what else, what other questions do you want me to just move through the ages or?
let's stick here for a minute. Then I'd love to hear what else is going on with that. But yeah, that early education. I think you hit on a very important point that as parents, I like to say that as soon as your first kid was born, or as soon as your first kid joined your family by adoption or whatever, you had to take your license for doing stupid things and turn it in.
Oops.
Right? I maybe held on to mine a little longer, but I think the same thing is true, that you also have to hand in your license for being uncomfortable about stuff. So many of us are uncomfortable talking about sex.
Yeah.
And how are we going to talk to our kid about sex abuse if we're not comfortable talking to them about sex?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and the other thing we have to keep in mind is, we have to leave our baggage at the door, and we've got to really get comfortable quickly with this, because it could make all the difference for your child. Just picture the 3-year-old child, maybe who's at the daycare center where there's an abuser on staff. And if this 3-year-old child looks that abuser in the eye and says, hey, you're not allowed to touch my penis, right? Is that the target for the abuser? Of course not. And that's what we want. We want that child to be strong and to understand that these are important rules for safety. And if anybody ever tries to do that, you're allowed to say no. And you need to tell mommy or daddy what happened. That's so valuable at that age. We also have to keep in mind that every child is unique, and they all are maturing at different rates. So there's not going to be this blanket, this is the exact age when you're teaching this, other than when your child is learning their words, they need to learn the right words, right? That is an exact age. But again, children learn words at different ages too. So when you're moving into this preschool and early elementary age, you're going to want to start talking to them about, again, that empowerment, that nobody should be seeing or touching your private body parts, especially once they're out of diapers. Really, nobody should be seeing or touching their private body parts, right? They're learning to wash themselves. We need to talk to them about photography, no pictures or videos of your private body parts, because it's just so tragic, but it's just prolific. The online child pornography is just overwhelmingly prolific. And people who like to look at child pornography typically need to bring their own stuff and show it to other people. It's like, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And that's why these predators are so big on getting pictures of our kids. Like, they want these pictures, online all the time. You're seeing 11 and 12-year-old children approached for nude photos of themselves. And it's because if you want to see someone else's child porn, you're going to have to produce your own. So we have
There's
to
a
be that
mutually assured
conversation.
destruction there,
Yeah,
right?
and we've got to
For the bad guys.
have that, not
Mhm.
just seeing, not just touching or playing with, but nobody should be taking pictures or videos of your private body parts or showing you pictures or videos of anyone else's. And then
I'll
once
take a moment real quick here and put in a shameless plug for our interview with Kat Code of Binary Tattoo, who addresses very specifically some of the social engineering and social media engineering tricks that predators use to get our tweens and teens to share those photos.
Yeah, and those are great resources, and parents need to be really highly aware of what's happening online. So once we're moving into like late preschool, early elementary, we want to be teaching the kids about personal boundary setting, right? People don't touch your body without your permission, and you don't touch other people without their permission either. So we're kind of teaching that this is a two-way street. We respect each other's personal boundaries. And that's really important and valuable, along with the fact that, hey, there's some unsafe people out there who might want to touch your privates or see your privates or have you touch theirs. And if that ever happens, you need to come and tell me. You need to tell me what happens, and you have permission to say no.
Which, as kids are getting acclimatized to the school environment, that's not always a message that's brought to the front loud and clear.
Right.
They're allowed to tell an adult, no, I'm not comfortable with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially like I've taught groups of kids, and I've said to them, sometimes you might have a teacher who just really loves to hug you. And what if you don't want that hug? Guess what? You're allowed to say no. Would you be able to say no? And they're like, oh, I don't think I could ever say no to my teacher. Again, and that's the parenting thing where we have instilled in our children respect and obey adult authority at all costs, right? Even if it makes you uncomfortable, you're a child and you have to do what you're told. So, if that teacher just swoops in and hugs, and this is about re-educating all of us as adults, right? We don't just swoop in and hug a child. We say, can I give you a hug? Will you give me a hug? And if they won't, how about a fist bump? How about a high five? Just allow the child to be the driver of the physical contact. Don't force physical touch on the children. And that's going to go a long way toward empowering them to control their body, which is really what we want, especially in a sexual abuse situation. We want them to feel like, guess what? My body is my body. Nobody gets to tell me how I'm touched, So.
And also, it seems like that's not only really great advice for being aware of and protected from sexual abuse, but it also begins this groundwork of the consent conversation that they're going to be having 10 years later.
Exactly.
Which is another very important conversation to have.
It's all this foundation laying that we start at the very beginning. And, if you've got parents who are listening now who have kids that are older, 8, 9, 10 years old, and they've been saying TT, guess what? Maybe it's time to go, I want to tell you something that we haven't talked about before. This is actually called a penis, it's never too late to get this to be a comfortable conversation in your family. And then the secrets. So we talk to the kids about the secrets and how, sometimes an unsafe person will hurt a kid and they'll tell them a scary lie to get them to keep it a secret. And like when you hold that secret inside your body, it's going to make you feel sick and scared and awful every day. And you just can't hold those secrets. You have to tell an adult you trust. And we also talk to them about who are those people. So that's a great exercise for parents. Let's sit down and make a list of who are your trusted adults. And that's different for every child, right? Some kids don't even live with their parents. Some kids don't have a relationship of trust with their parents.
Some kids are being molested by their parents.
Some kids are being molested by their parents, exactly. So children need to have an understanding that there are good and kind adults in their life, And they need to identify who those people are. Who do I believe would watch out for me, would want me to be safe? And those are the trusted adults that they would have on their list. And we also tell them, sadly, sometimes the child will go tell their trusted adult, and the trusted adult doesn't want to hear it for whatever reason. My brother would never do that, or, my boyfriend would never do that, or whatever. And we tell the kids, if that ever happens, then you need to tell another trusted adult. Don't just give up. Just keep telling until somebody hears you and helps you. Then we get into a little older elementary, and this is where it's going to turn into like the wild, wild west with the questions, right? So you never know what is coming out of your kid's mouth and what they want to know about. And I always say to parents, when I train parents, I'm like, okay, the very first time you get that first sexually oriented question, you had better not cave. You had better not show fear. You had better not shut them down. Don't ever say you're too young to talk about that. Don't ever, act like, oh my gosh, because they will never come to you again. Right? They have a million places they can go for information. And if they come to you because they trust you, then you need to reciprocate, and you need to trust that you can talk to them candidly and give them good information, and say to them, I always want you to be able to come to me with any of these types of questions, or really with any questions at all. When my kids were younger, oh my gosh, I'll never forget my daughter. When she was like in middle school and early high school, it seemed like ways to not get pregnant were like a thing that all the girls were talking about. Oh, if you do this, you can't get pregnant. Oh, if you do this, you can't get pregnant. And it seemed like on a weekly basis, she was coming home to me going, okay, so this is what I heard about how you might not get pregnant if you do this. And I'm like, oh, just no, that is not true. You can still get pregnant. Right? So yeah, it's just, you have to just get really comfortable. In that world with your child. And most of us didn't have that with our own parents. So this is a huge learning curve for all of us. Most of us got a one single really uncomfortable talk, like the talk. And a lot of times after we'd already heard about it somewhere else. And then we never spoke of it again. And just for your child's safety, for their mental health, for their physical health, this has to be a conversation that continues inside the family. And it includes not just safety and sexual abuse, but it includes all things related to body safety and mental health and relationships and all of that.
Absolutely. And you mentioned about how if they're not going to hear it from us, they're going to hear it from somebody else. One of the big changes between our kids and our own lives growing up is the ubiquity of information, and the ubiquity of sexualized content. I mean, we're old enough to remember that, man, if that one friend's dad threw away a Playboy, and we managed to get it out of the right, and that was all the naked that we saw until we were well into high school. But now it's, you could even kind of go on kids these days don't know how easy you got it, but finding it the other way, right? But they will find that information, and unfortunately that information can be dead wrong, like the rumors and the urban legends about how to prevent pregnancy by eating a tomato while doing a handstand, or unfortunately a bad actor who's looking for kids who don't know, because that ignorance makes them more vulnerable.
Yep, absolutely. And I think one of the things that is the most disheartening to me is this proliferation of online pornography, and not child pornography, but online pornography, and this very targeted marketing effort, if you will, at our children, even our very young children, where these porn sites are embedding child-friendly search terms into their SEO. So my 8-year-old could search for SpongeBob SquarePants videos, and could land on a porn site because of that. It's absolutely terrifying. And what we're seeing happen, is younger and younger kids are being exposed to pornography online. And B, this is where they're getting their views about how adults behave in the bedroom. And this is sensationalized. It's often incredibly violent. It is, I'm overwhelmed by how bad things have gotten and how much worse they're going to continue to get, and how parents are completely unaware at how easily their children are seeing porn. Like, this is not a conversation. If you ever see online porn, you need to be talking to your child about, hey, you're going to see pornography online, and let's talk about what pornography is. And let's talk about how much of what you see online is illegal. That's the thing that people don't understand, is all child pornography is illegal. But if any of the people participating in the video are being coerced, that's illegal as well. And you have no idea when you're watching that video if that was coerced or voluntary. And I would say most of the time it is not voluntary, especially the female actors.
And especially if you broaden the scope a little bit to how much consent did you really give if you're doing it to feed an addiction?
Right, exactly. Because your trafficker, and typically it's your trafficker, has gotten you addicted and now is forcing you to perform in these videos. It's just this, it's all horrible, but what it's doing is it's changing our children's brains, and it's changing their approach to relationships and sex and sexuality in a really, really bad direction. So that's something that all parents need to have very high on their radar.
And to pay closer attention to our children's online activity. And unfortunately, I don't think that genie is going back in the bottle anytime soon. And so we need to be able to know, again, like you're saying, to have conversations early, have them earlier than we're comfortable having them. And moving on from then, I'll tell a story that my 20-year-old probably won't mind that I told, but when he was about 15, his phone was open on the counter, and he, for some reason that it hadn't turned off to its home screen, and there was some pornography. Relatively tame pornography, all things considered, and I'm just, and this is the first time he and I really had the conversation in their face. And I said, okay, buddy, before I give you your phone back, I need you to ask me 3 intelligent, thoughtful questions about sex and pornography. It's like,
yeah.
Well, buddy,
just what every 15-year-old boy wants to do, right?
Well, buddy, until you do, I'm just going to start talking to you about sex. And he tapped out in about 5 seconds and asked me some pretty good and intelligent questions. The spiel I gave him was about body image, and about how, well, don't judge your body by the bodies of the guys in those films. It's but, and then he actually asked a really good question about, well, what if a girl is in love with me and is offering to have sex with me, but I'm not in love with her, and how do I tell her no? So that was I was proud of him for having that question in mind.
Yeah. I feel like over the past 10 to 15 years, sex has lost all sacredness. I think the parents of the 60s children probably thought the same thing when they grew up in the 40s and 50s. But like, it's just all out there, and there's no. It's not about relationship anymore. It's not about any kind of emotional connection anymore. It's purely physical, and it's just kind of, whatever, whenever, wherever. I feel sad for our children about that. You mentioned your 15-year-old son, and I think it's very important for parents to not overlook your teenage boys in this equation, because they need to learn to be respectful of the females in their life when it comes to the word no. Understand that no means no. And if she's compromised by drugs or alcohol, that also means no. And, you know, when my son was that age, I always talk to him about, you need to protect the girls. That is your job. You need to make sure the girls stay safe. Whenever he was at a party, whenever he went anywhere, I just always reminded him about the girls. And I said, you need to watch out for the girls and don't let anybody take advantage of any girls when you're present in the room. And he often talked about, just like your son said, girls that would throw themselves at the boys. You know, they were drunk at a party and they would be throwing themselves at the boys. And I just kept saying, drunk means no. Like you do not want to wake up the next day and find on Instagram a girl accusing you of sexual assault. And that can happen if you aren't very, very careful about your relationships and about how you treat sexual interactions. So we have to have that be part of the conversation. Our boys.
Honestly, it's not that much fun without informed, enthusiastic consent. It's a much better experience all around.
Yes, 100%. And consent. And our, you know, I don't want to lay that entirely at the feet of the boys, but boys and men are almost exclusively the perpetrators of sexual assault. So it really is at the feet of the boys and men to change that paradigm and to stop, right?
It is the cultural paradigm, the cultural conversation. And that might change in a few generations. It probably won't, because it hasn't. But it is on the, I think it is more in the hands of the men to change our behavior and change our assumptions and change the cultural
and change the way you hold each other accountable. That's something that, you know, there's a lot of this bystander stuff that really needs to stop. If you see another guy behaving badly with a woman or a girl, you need to step in. You need to be willing to be brave and step in and put a stop to it. I think.
And on that topic, very important one that I picked up from that interview with Cat Code was, if you're a teenager, you know, teens are sexting, and we are as naive to think that they're not as our parents were to think that we weren't getting busy in the back seats of cars. Some of us had personal decisions not to, but a lot of that was going on. And if your partner, you know, say you're in high school, you're 16, your partner sends you a picture. In most states of the union, that's not child pornography if she gave you consent. However, and this is, I just found that out fairly recently. However, the second I show that to somebody else, I have distributed child pornography. So if you share that picture, you are in trouble.
But
and don't ask for it, because there's risks.
And maybe I'm in one of those states, and maybe I need to check into other state laws. But I thought largely across the country, this was, you know, child pornography is defined as 18 and under.
So I'm not a primary reporter on that. I'm reporting what I heard, and apparently a lot of states have changed it to protect the youngins.
The laws certainly have not caught up with the prolific texting and sexting that the kids are doing, but there's still the laws, and the kids need to understand it's possession of child pornography if it's on your device, and it's distribution if you share it with somebody else. So I would be erring on the side of caution regardless of my state, especially because the internet, right? If that picture that you share in a state that considers it legal gets shared somewhere in a state it's illegal, guess what? That could come back on you. So
exactly. Not to mention the fact that you don't want to be 30 and running for Congress and have a picture of yourself topless at 15. But,
I mean, and that's another sort of sad state of affairs, that those things are less and less of note. You know, it's like, everybody did that, everybody does that, you know. So again, I don't want to sound prudish, but I hate it. I hate the direction that we've gone in the last 10 years.
And where everyone falls on that, right? Because there's political opinions, there's religious opinions, there's personal ethical opinions. The fact of the matter is that this is where we are. That very much like, what was that great line about? This was actually about data mining, big data, about how it's just like sex in high school. Everybody says they're doing it. Not nearly as many people as say they're doing it are actually doing it. And most of the people who are doing it wrong. Right? But yeah, but I think there's a reality that's smaller than the perception, but the perception is everywhere. And I kind of want to put that aside for just a second, because we went from late elementary and now we're talking about high school, early college.
Yeah, and we also
and then
talked
there's that,
about, well, we talked about, so early to middle elementary was sort of the discussion about consent and feeling comfortable saying no to an adult who's unwanted physical contact, and then also the ripping off the Band-Aid when their first question about sex comes. And that's really going to help you when you're addressing your middle, those questions, that open dialogue. That's going to be the most important thing you can do to help keep your child safe. And also being really, really tied into what's happening in their online world. It dawned on me just a few weeks ago. I was in a conversation with somebody else about this, and I went, you know what? We are so entrenched in all of our children's in-person activities, right? We're going to all of their sporting events and their ballet recitals and their, plays and performances, and we're team mom and coach dad and all these things, right? We are completely 100% all in. And these kids have an online world that is almost equally important. And for some kids, it's even more important than their real life world. And we largely disregard it. And we as parents need to take note that this is a huge part of my child's world too. And I need to understand it and be involved in it. So that's another way that you're going to help keep them safe and help them navigate the hurdles that they're going to face in that part of their world.
And that starts, sounds like you're saying, with those earlier conversations about what's appropriate, and giving them permission to say no, especially, and as we're reaching into those tween years and those teen years where they start having romantic entanglements, about how it's okay to say, I'm not ready for that. Yeah.
And when you say no is a one-word sentence. Like that's it. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to make excuses. And you shouldn't reciprocate a response to no. If you say no to somebody, that's it. It's over. No. So I'm sorry. Did you not hear me when I just said no?
No.
That's all you have to say. And they need to respect that. And kids need to reciprocate that as well with each other, right? That's personal boundaries.
Exactly. Rory Miller, another guest on the show, brought up the point that no is a perfectly functioning sentence. If you give more information past no, you're not refusing anymore, you're negotiating. Right.
Yeah.
And
suddenly
no should be
credibility.
Because whatever reason you give, then that person can then engage in an argument about the reason.
Exactly.
And just letting our kids say no.
Yeah.
Now, I do want...
And we don't have to teach kids to say no, do we? They sort of innately know how to say no, and then we quash it from a very young age. So got to find that balance.
And then re-educating, kind of what you do about bringing them back around to being able to say no.
Yeah.
So you talked about a lot of things that we should talk to our kids about, and I do want to get back to that conversation about teens, and because then we get it. There's a lot of gray, might not be the right thing, but when you're starting to talk about, okay, this person seems like a person who you're having a relationship with, who is interested in exploring sex with you. This person is clearly being a predatory. And although you might not be able to just point and say, no, that's sex abuse, even though it's happening between two teenagers. talking to our kids about that and spotting the
Um,
difference?
and so
Mhm,
we have to sort of draw the line
mhm,
between sexual abuse and unwanted
mhm,
sexual contact,
mhm,
because molestation to the letter of the law is typically there's a number of years of age
mhm,
difference, and I think it's like at least 4 years or something.
mhm,
So when you're talking about a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old, that is unwanted sexual contact. And
mhm,
we need to approach that conversation a little bit differently. You asked me a while
mhm.
ago, you said, obviously you're talking to a kindergartner differently than you're talking to a middle
Yeah.
schooler. And 100% we are. We couch the language with the younger kids, and we really try to reinforce positive things with the younger kids. And with the older kids, we can be like, hey, this is what you need to know. And
Mhm,
here's these people are out here. Here's the red flags that you need to be looking
mhm,
for in your real life and online. And just kind of, we can be really straightforward with kids about that. But it's
mhm.
still the same message, personal boundaries. When
Yeah.
you when somebody is making you feel scared, threatened, nervous,
Mhm,
uncomfortable, you're
mhm,
allowed to move away. You're allowed to get away from them. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to
mhm,
exit that situation. You're allowed to say no.
mhm.
You're allowed to defend yourself. So,
And you
you
don't
know,
owe them
an
a response to their
explanation.
text, and you don't owe
No.
them closure.
Yeah, that goes back to the
Mhm.
politeness, right? We're
Yeah.
instilling politeness in our children from this very young age. And so many times,
Mhm,
especially in, and when kids get older, the possibility of being attacked by a stranger is certainly
mhm,
higher than it
mhm,
is, younger kids are almost exclusively sexually assaulted by people they know. But when you get into older
mhm.
ages, that stranger is a more frequent occurrence.
Yeah.
And in those situations, we need to be, helping them understand safety comes before politeness, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
You don't owe this person, you
Mhm,
especially don't owe this person anything at all. If somebody's coming up to you on the street and asking you for the time, you can
mhm,
just go, hey, back off. You don't need to come closer to me. And people
mhm,
just in general would never possibly think of doing that because it's impolite, right?
mhm,
And that's what that predator banks
mhm.
on. That they're
Yeah.
going to approach you in a nice way with a non-threatening question. You're going to not do anything or say
Mhm,
anything. They're just going to come right up to you, and
mhm.
boom, you're being attacked.
Yeah.
So that's something else we have to instill in these
Mhm,
kids, especially the older kids. Politeness takes a back seat to safety, right?
mhm.
Always put your safety first. So,
Yeah. So here's an important question about that, I think, which is politeness is a social construct that we have that's important to adults, but there's that little zone of about 6 years in middle school and high school where it's not just politeness, but it's also popularity and reputation,
yeah.
and is one of the largest boogeymen in your life at that time. What
Mhm.
are some things that you teach kids that age to get them over that?
So, one of the things we talk about with the kids, and especially
Mhm,
online, because more followers equals more popular. I mean, that's
mhm,
again social construct, right? More followers equals more
mhm,
popular. So, we're teaching them about that as well. And we're saying, hey, guess what? If you have public profiles online, we can guarantee there are sexual predators following you. We can
mhm,
guarantee it. There are 50,000 sexual predators active online every minute of every day in this country. So you've got predators following you if you have a profile
mhm,
that's public. And then we say, would you let a complete stranger just come walking in your bedroom to go through your
mhm,
stuff? And they look at us like we're crazy. And we're like, but
mhm,
you have a public profile, you'll let strangers see your online world, you'll let friends of friends. Just because I know her and she knows him doesn't mean I know him.
mhm,
Why, just because he wants to friend me online? No, if you don't know somebody and trust them in your
mhm,
real life, they shouldn't be seeing
mhm,
your online life. And period. And again, that's about make a choice of safety
mhm,
versus this perceived popularity. And
mhm,
we say, you know exactly how popular you are, and you know it has nothing to do with the number of followers on your Snapchat, right?
mhm,
So just kind of putting that into their head. I don't know if it's making any difference, frankly, because there's just so much, like you said, there's so much social pressure, especially in their online worlds. So we've got to follow that up with, here's all the red flags that you should be watching for. And then in real life, we talk to them about, predators in your real life are often going to be people who are trying to take a relationship they have with you and move it out of its normal construct. So like, if you have a math tutor that invites you to go to the movies with them, that's like not a normal thing for a math tutor and a student, right? So that's a red flag that could be a dangerous situation for you, right? If you have a coach that invites you to spend the night at their house, i.e. Jerry Sandusky, remember that scandal? He was having young boys, 11-year-old boys, sleeping over at his house with him. That is not normal. And nobody questioned it because he was such a good guy, right? So
it's interesting that you bring that up, because there's a concept called baseline that the operators and like special forces are using, and it started to trickle out into the common argot, which is it recognizes the fact that what's normal for this thing isn't necessarily for normal for that thing. And for example, two bars, one is often a very raucous bar and one is often a very quiet bar. The level of noise doesn't tell you which one is dangerous. But if you walk into the bar that's normally loud and it's all quiet, that change from the norm is a huge indicator of risk. And in an interview we did with a suicide counselor about signs of suicide, what she had to say was this very same thing, that there's not a real long list of things that are big warning signs, but what you want to look for is changes from what you've come to view as your child's normal behavior. And we got the same thing about online, about bullying prevention. And here we are hearing again that some of the good warnings we can give to our kids is, okay, is this request normal for somebody who has this relationship with you?
Exactly. And also for parents, the same thing applies. Changes in normal behavior are often going to be signals of sexual abuse. So a parent came to us and told us about her young son, 7 years old, being molested by or touched inappropriately, again, molestation under the law, right? But this child was sexually assaulted by a classmate, another 7-year-old boy. And it happened multiple times over a period of months. And once the child finally disclosed to his mother, she looked back and she's like, okay, he was very obsessed with going to jail. And, what happens when people do something bad? Do they go to jail? And it was because this child, this perpetrator, told him that they would go to jail if anybody found out. He was suddenly not sleeping as well as he had been. He was, showing signs of anxiety. He was wetting the bed. All these little things that when she had the 20/20 hindsight, she was like, wow, that's when it started. So just be tuned in to those little signs, those little things that aren't normal for your child, and dig a little deeper and find out what's going on. And you could find out your child is being bullied. You could find out that your child is feeling suicidal. You could find out that your child is being sexually abused by somebody.
Just by paying attention and noticing those differences and following them up.
That parental sixth sense, right? Mother's intuition, they always say, but it's true. It's there and it's true.
Absolutely. So I think we've come through the different age groups, from early childhood to young adults, and then that tricky age at the end where there's an age below which any sexual content is DEFCON 0. Time to really, time to stop everything, hit the brakes, call the authorities, and resist the very human impulse to go spend 20 minutes alone in a room with the perpetrator. And then we get into this area where, and we've touched on this a little bit, about navigating normal sexual exploration between two kids who are peers, and those have their own risks. And I think that a lot of the advice that you've been giving so far will help us coach our kids through that as well. But then also the predatory, either chronologically older or just experientially older child, who is, this is not that relationship between peers who are exploring a natural, normal part of the human condition,
Yeah.
but an abusive, even if it's not in the eyes of the law. I mean, a 37-year-old who likes to sleep with 18-year-olds is not a criminal, but is certainly an
But
asshole.
it's not right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are some things that, does Revved Up Kids address this, or do you have some thoughts and opinions about addressing that?
And interestingly, we just had a guest blogger probably a month and a half ago, and we've got a 2-part blog on our website called The Survivor. And her perpetrator was a classmate when they were 14 years old. So, and when you read that story, it very clearly lays out the manipulation, the way that, I mean, it's almost like reading a story of a trafficker grooming a victim. It's really, really disturbing. And she is now in her mid-20s, and she's still dealing with the collateral damage of that abusive situation. She was subsequently sexually assaulted by others after that. And unfortunately, this poly-victimization is a real thing. It's almost like predators have radar where they just can pick up a vibe. I don't exactly know how, but they just can pick up a vibe that is like, oh, that's my target. This person is not going to resist me. This person is going to be easy for me to manipulate. You also hear that in domestic abuse situations where women who have been in violent relationships tend to repeat that pattern. It's almost like I hate to say it, but it's like that radar. Those abusers can pick out their victim from a crowd.
Well, abusers are cowards, and cowards don't like picking a fair fight. There was research a while back that got fairly famous in criminology circles, where they took a number of violent criminals and they showed them the same footage of a corner on a New York City street and said, hey, point to the people that you target. And the overlap was more than 90%.
Wow.
It was always the same people. And then and very few of the criminals could point out why, that intuition. But then,
I just know.
Some other people, experts in kinesiology and whatnot, looked at it and identified a number of common characteristics about the length of their stride, whether their head was up.
Body language, so much.
And I feel like a lot of the program that you offer there will be times when somebody who takes that course and really internalizes it has to use it. And then there will be, much like with the martial arts training I've done, there will be a much wider group of people who are just a little more confident and a little more aware.
Yeah.
And these cowardly abusers aren't even going to try.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. They know who to target. It's almost a science. And that's another thing that the internet has done, sadly, is it has removed this this stigma and this sort of island-like nature that used to be a sexual predator. They used to just have to operate alone, and they didn't ever interact with other people like them. And now they're in chat rooms on the dark web exchanging best practices for luring and molesting and grooming children, and they're normalizing their behavior. And it's really, really scary. And when you talk about you know, oh, it's probably not getting worse. It's probably the same way it's always been and the same way it'll always be. I think it is getting worse because of that. I think more and more people who were leaning that direction or just dipping their toes into it now see hundreds or thousands of people just like them who like to have sex with children, and they think it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's really, really scary.
And even if the number of people who are doing that doesn't increase, I don't know if anybody has the numbers on it. What is absolutely certain is that they're more sophisticated and have more information and even more training in some ways than they did in the 80s and the 90s. So the risk is there, and it is a worse risk than we experienced when we were growing up. Although on the flip side, we have, as parents, more resources like Revved Up Kids. You're a nonprofit in Atlanta. When we were growing up, I never would have heard of you.
Right.
And so the good guys also have the ability to communicate and to trade notes and to exchange information and best practices, which is what Revved Up Kids is doing and what Safest Family on the Block is doing.
Yeah. And we're offering virtual trainings. So that's the great thing now, is we're not constrained just to Atlanta. And so not knowing when this is going to air, because I think you mentioned during April, we do have free grant funded trainings that are open to the public in April, starting actually next week. So
because that's it's Child Abuse Awareness
Prevention Month. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Prevention Month. Yeah.
So we're offering free trainings beginning next week for tweens and teen girls. And we've got a number of workshops on the calendar throughout the month. So, we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Viewers, I'll put all that information in the show notes for you, so you can link right to it. And great. Well, thank you so much, Allie, for coming on today. And before we go, what's something people don't ask you about enough, that you don't get enough chance to tell the world about?
Oh my goodness. How can we help? I think, my advice to parents is just open that conversation and talk to your kids about their safety as often as you talk to them about their manners, saying please and thank you, brushing their teeth, all of those things. Their safety is equally, if not more important than any of that. And we just need to get comfortable with it, and then support us by following us on our social media. We use that as a forum for sharing safety information. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And just get plugged in and use the resources that we have available and take advantage of them. And if you want to schedule a private group training, we're available to do that virtually as well. If you're in Atlanta Metro, we can do it in person, but anywhere else, I know you're in California, Jason. So anywhere else that you've got listeners, we are offering live virtual trainings. So
we'll definitely follow that up. We'll make sure the links are there. And I'm not sure when this video will air, but if it's in late April, we'll make sure that we put some notes in our social media feed where folks can find you.
Yeah.
And I really like what you said there about how, have the conversation with kids. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tricky. But if you asked 100 parents, would you face off with a biker gang to protect your kid? They don't go,
Yeah.
Would you run through a burning room to protect your kid? Would you sit down and talk to them frankly and honestly about sex? Oh, I don't know.
Oh,
we need to overcome that.
Exactly.
And I think you're doing great work to encourage parents to do exactly that.
And one more thing, because I don't know who your listeners are, but we would love to make this training free all the time. And that comes with people who fund us. So foundations and grants, whenever we get grants, whenever we get money, we are using it to provide free training in the community. And now that we can do that virtually, and we're also rolling out video training shortly. So we'd love for that to just always be free. So if there's somebody out there that's like, I would too, and wants to give us some money to help that happen, we would be happy to take your money.
Outstanding. Absolutely. So that you heard it here first, Bill Gates, when you find this video.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you
Well,
so
thank you
much.
so much, Allie. Really
It was
appreciate it.
Great to see you. Great to meet you. And yeah, I'll look forward to hearing this when it airs. Thanks.
Outstanding. Stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching today. I hope you found something useful or maybe even inspiring. If you liked what you saw, please take a few minutes to subscribe, like, and comment. Those little things add up to big help for the channel. If you loved it, consider checking out our Facebook page for more family safety news and information. And think about supporting us on Patreon, where you'll get early access, monthly training resources, blooper footage, and other exclusive benefits. You'll find links to both in the show notes. Most of all, thank you for being part of the safest family on the block team. Stay safe, everybody. See you next time.